All right, Doug, we're here in person today. It's October 31st, Halloween, actually. So thanks for joining me here at my house.
Well, it's trick or treat time, so I arrived at your door with an empty bag and you took me
I'm
in.
going to fill it up with candy before you go. All right,
But
so
no candy corn. I'd like strictly Reese's peanut butter cups and perhaps Snickers.
you'll have to beat my daughter to it. But yes, candy corn is a disaster. I don't know where that ever came from. Okay, so what we want to talk about today is the World Economic Forum. There's been this propaganda video circulating recently. And actually, the video apparently was been out since 2016. It's just become on people's radar recently. It was on Twitter, and I'm just going to share that real quickly with everybody, and then we're gonna comment on it. So let's see. Let me go ahead and play this. So that's it, Doug. What stands out to you there?
Well, the entire thing stands out as being disturbing. The first thing, wish we had a list so I can read them all.
Okay, so the first one is you'll own nothing and you'll be happy.
That was rather shocking. So if I own nothing and you own nothing, stuff will still exist. Who owns it exactly?
Well, according to them, whatever you want, you'll rent and it'll be delivered by drone. So you're right, there will still be stuff, and apparently somebody must own that stuff because you're renting it from them.
Well, maybe they're not talking about, or are they, capital and houses and cars? I mean, where do they want to draw the line here with you'll own nothing? That's a kind of an overreaching statement.
They are talking. It's based upon an article that was written in 2016, and it wasn't. It was real high level, just like this little propaganda video was. But in that too, they really are talking about like it's almost like expanding the Uberification of everything. So that literally your house you wouldn't own it. Your living room, wouldn't be used when it's not be used by you. It could be used by someone else. I mean, they do talk about not owning anything, and capital too. Cars. Why own cars when there's Uber? Why own a house when there's Airbnb? Take that to the furthest extent.
Well, from one point of view, it doesn't bother me because I wouldn't mind being, at least at this stage of my life, a Taoist monk who doesn't own anything and really doesn't care. But I don't think that's quite what they're talking about. Not everybody wants to be an itinerant monk either. So it's kind of inculcating this idea of you will own nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like saying, if you wish, you can rent things instead of owning them. And
the car you can lease instead of buy.
Exactly.
Fine.
And of course, almost everybody does lease a car today because it's not like anybody pays cash for a car or even finances it for 2 years or 5 or 7. Can't afford to do that. So you lease it. and you never own it. It goes from being, as I've often said, a small asset to immediately becoming a rather major liability. So this idea of not owning anything, it makes it seem like it's carefree and breezy, but it's actually enslaving, because you don't own that car you're leasing, but you still got to pay for it, and you're tied unless you want to default on your debt. So there's all kinds of hidden things in this video.
Yeah, there are, and they do frame it all as very, very cheery, and these things that could be, you could have taken that same video, taken the same text, changed out the music in it, and shown different pictures, and it could be a dystopian nightmare.
Exactly. Somebody should do that using exactly their words.
Exactly. They should, because it really is, it can be just as bad. Now, and there are some things in there that don't necessarily sound awful, like what seem inevitable, like the US won't be the world's leading superpowers. It'll be a multipolar rather than a unipolar global system. That's likely, right?
Likely.
So that you see that and you go, well, okay, I understand that.
Statement of fact. But if you're going to have these are predictions going off in different directions. One of them, yes, they're putting them all on the same level. And the next one is the same way, I think, isn't it?
The third one is, you won't die waiting for an organ donor. We won't transplant organs. We will print new ones. Okay,
technological prediction. And it seems to me like a very reasonable one for many reasons. But the fact is that even in today's world, you don't have to die of anything. Most people don't. But one of the problems that underlies this is that we have too of most anything, and poor people are happy, or would be happy, I presume, well, nobody's happy to do this, but some person in the third world, if offered 25,000 or 50,000 for a kidney, might say, okay, I've got another kidney. I can use that money. So, but there's no market in these things, which is why people have their body parts stolen and people are killed for body parts, because there's no market in it. So, but still, the idea that these things can be printed, it's wonderful, and also I think inevitable. So
yeah, it makes sense. But I think your point is about how you're not able to exploit your own body is I think that's a really interesting one. And actually, and that expands not just to your own body, but you're not allowed to exploit your own environment in order to give yourself capital to sort of improve your lot in life. And I think that, you see that when we talk about renting all the time. I think everyone rents their house now, even if you own it, because stop paying your property taxes. If you think you own your home, stop paying your property taxes and see who really owns it. And I just think, and try building a new property on your home. Using the materials that are there. No, you're going to have to get people's permission. You can't use the trees on your land for that. You can't,
Well, it seems like we really don't own anything right now.
Exactly.
I mean, we don't have to wait to not own anything.
We're just not happy about it now. What's going to change is that we're going to be happy about not owning it.
And the most shocking and disturbing thing about it is, if you don't own your own body, which if I can't sell a kidney to somebody, obviously I don't own my kidney. I mean, what do you own? I mean, your body is your primary possession, and then your house and car, secondary. You actually don't own anything. Who does own these things? The collective, the state,
Well, yeah, clearly the community. However you want to define the community.
Sounds better than the state. The state sounds kind of ominous.
Yeah, everyone likes the community. Community is important.
Yeah, no, community is friendly. It's potluck dinners and all that. I've always thought of the state as being that kind of thing, of course.
Potluck dinners.
Yeah.
All right. So speaking of dinner, well, the fourth one was you'll eat much less meat. Instead of it being a regular thing, it'll be an occasional treat. Like they even get a little rhyme in there for it. And it'll be better for you and better for the environment.
Exactly. This is actually a well thought out propaganda piece because they conflate reasonable scientific predictions with projections of what they think is good. Those are two different things, obviously, but they put them together. So, yeah, I guess as the success of a number of commercial companies that make artificial meat has shown, it's all just carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen. So sure, they're going to be able to put meat together so it's just as good or better than the real thing. Makes sense.
But it does seem like they're all trying to put the goal is to push people down the in the wrong direction on the prosperity ladder. Because one of the biggest things you see in advanced countries and advanced societies is that the calorie consumption goes up dramatically, and the amount of meat that's consumed goes up dramatically. It's like, so it's something that tends to happen with richer nations. And it seems like to me, the idea that they want to remove that is just an example of a lot of the things that they want to, like the regressive policies, really trying to push people not into poverty necessarily, but certainly away from being prosperous and healthy.
Yeah, and this meat thing, of course, is interesting because there are people, and I understand them, that don't like to eat meat for ethical reasons. You have to kill another living being.
Totally understand that.
And, the conditions under which chickens and hogs in particular are brought up, where they're basically in tiny little spaces until they're slaughtered. It's the ethics of it are, I think, actually questionable. And certainly the aesthetics of it are highly questionable.
Yeah.
And I don't like things that are unaesthetic. So, all right, nothing wrong with a world like that. But it's a question of who's in charge here. And people have eaten animals for millions of years and been eaten by animals. Right. Circle of life. I'm not opposed to eating artificial meat if it tastes as good as
I'm not either, but I think it goes back to this idea we mentioned before, where basically it's denying people the opportunity to exploit the resources that are available to them. Like an animal, they can grow on their own. They can, you could produce your own meat, but you can't produce your own artificial meat. Like it comes from the impossible meats or somebody like that. It's given to you.
You're absolutely right. If the supply chain is not there to produce your artificial meat, and you don't have real meat, maybe you won't have any meat. I mean, it's all a question of kind of control.
It does seem that way. I agree 100%. And one of the things that this talks about, the next one is 1 billion people will be displaced by climate change, which is the big bugaboo among these folks, climate change. And it says, we'll have to do a better job welcoming and integrating refugees.
Yeah, of course, whenever they use the word we, I think back to the joke about the Lone Ranger and Tonto. The Lone Ranger says to Tonto, we're surrounded by Indians. We're going to die. And Tonto says, what do you mean we, white man? But no, I don't like the word we when it's used in an exhortative type of way. But, well, first of all, climate change. The Earth's climate has been changing radically for the last 4.5 billion years. And it's going to continue changing radically until a couple of billion years from now, we're subsumed into an expanding sun and are burnt to a crisp. So, yeah, climate change is interesting, but the way it's being promoted as a political meme is much more disturbing than any possible change in the climate itself. And
there is clearly a refugee problem. There's a huge migration of peoples from Africa and from Latin America to the northern, richer countries. But it seems like it's much more economically driven than it is climate driven.
Yes, completely. Completely and totally. And I don't have any doubt that as Africa, I mean, by the UN's projections, I'm trying to get this right, and I think I am, that by the year 2100, about 45% of all the people on the continent will be Africans or from Africa. That's rather shocking. And by the year 2100, the three largest cities in the world will be in order: Lagos, Kinshasa, and Dar es Salaam. Uh, in each case, Lagos, 150, it's hard to contemplate 150 million people in a city, but that's what they project. Dar es Salaam, 80. I mean, when I first went to Dar es Salaam in 1980, it impressed me as a quiet, charming town that was like from the 1930s, where there were tramp steamers out in the harbor, little ones, little tramp steamers, and sleazy sailors' bars on the waterfront, and it'll be nothing like that when it's 85 million people.
How could it be?
So anyway, what's going to happen to all those Africans? That's not a tangent. Those Africans are all going to Europe for many, many reasons. And it first happened in 2015, where 1 million migrants from the Mohammedan world basically invaded Europe, feed people and boat people. But if I was a young Nigerian, I would get to Europe any way possible.
Yep, can't blame them.
No, can't blame them.
I think the people that need to be blamed are the people who are not welcoming enough for them, according to Klaus Schwab.
Yes, no, it's absolutely insane, and it's asking for disaster, because when you put people of different culture, race, religion, language, everything into one political entity, everybody uses the government today as a cornucopia to distribute wealth from everybody into favored groups. So this is how civil wars start. I mean, no, it's going to end very badly for the Europeans, who aren't reproducing anyway.
The next one was that polluters will have to pay to emit carbon dioxide. There will be a global price on carbon, and this will make fossil fuels history.
Carbon, the new enemy element.
Which is really tough, because it is the basis of life, if I recall.
Yes, everything. It all revolves around carbon. I mean, there was a time when uranium was the enemy element, and then sulfur for a while was the enemy element. Lead became an enemy element for a while. I mean, this is like a battle against the periodic table of elements. I mean, who's next? I mean, carbon, perhaps the most benign of all elements. Okay. Once again, this is a giant fraud that ties in with climate change.
Well, the choice of words, I love this. Polluters will have to pay to emit carbon dioxide. Now, for the record, I just emitted some carbon dioxide.
Exactly.
So I'm a polluter.
Simply breathing.
And I'm going to have to pay.
But you're not really as bad as all the sheep and cows out there that are emitting methane as opposed to carbon dioxide. So CH4 is much more deadly than CO2. But still, carbon's the enemy. So another reason, going back to not eating meat, is getting rid of all these animals that are emitting giant amounts of methane, which they say is 20 times more destructive than CO2.
20 times.
20 times.
I love how precise the scientists are. It's not 22 times or 18.
Yeah,
They got it dialed in. It's 20.
And everybody forgets that CO2 is plant food. We breathe in oxygen. Plants breathe in carbon dioxide. That's what they need to respirate, and they do respirate. So this is all crazy. This is, once again, I think it's mostly scientism, using the appurtenances and the language and of science for political purposes. So.
And to me, fundamentally, this whole thing is so anti-life, like anti-human. It's the way it all feels to me. When, again, you're calling anybody who emits carbon dioxide essentially a polluter. You're starting at that baseline, and then you're saying that there's going to be a global market on the price of it. That's basically, I mean, to people who are conspiracy minded, you look at that and you go, basically, that's a control grid, basically trying to tax the life-giving element.
Yeah, and it actually gets down to property rights, which these people apparently don't believe
No,
in at
apparently
all.
not.
It's that, look, when people polluted rivers, it's because rivers, by dumping industrial waste into them, it's because the river is not privately owned. It's the commons. And if everybody owns it, nobody owns it. So you might as well just use it any way that you want. But the thing is everything should be privately owned. So people would have a direct incentive to treat it in the best way possible.
Mm.
That's out of the question when everything's commonly owned.
Well, community owned, Doug. Community owned.
Community owned,
Yeah.
right? Not state owned.
Well, I did national park tours, one of the few sort of trips you could do this year. But a lot of the parts, a lot of the areas in the national park were actually closed. The areas like that you needed the backcountry permits for were closed. So for whatever reason, they, for COVID allegedly, they had to close the backcountry. And one in Yellowstone, they actually closed one of the main rivers, so you weren't allowed to go wade in it, and people often did. And the rangers were just befuddled by the fact that people still were doing it. They don't you know that the river's closed?
But don't you know that COVID might attack you in the
exactly.
river?
Be careful. It's just crazy, but it's a community property. So I feel like we should have been able to use it if we wanted to. Anyway, but let's see. So the seventh one was, this is kind of this, like the Oregon one. Scientists will have worked out how to keep you healthy in space.
It's interesting. I'm sure it's true. Mm-hmm. But how is that relevant to anything?
I think they take these things that are just so anti-human, and then they or at least anti-freedom, and then they intersperse these weird, these very vague sci-fi claims in there. They just mix the two together, and they just feel like, oh, it's all the same. It's all cheerful. It'd be great.
Yeah, it is strange. Did they mention Mars in particular?
Yes, they said you could be planning a trip to Mars.
I'm all for it, but
maybe they'll have meat there.
Who's going to pay for that trip to Mars? And how does this? Why should the 8 billion? Why should it be relevant to the 8 billion people on the? They're not going to. 8 billion people aren't going to Mars. Maybe a few people.
Maybe a few, yeah. But I think it's just it doesn't seem like this is accidental. I think the World Economic Forum has proven in the last year to be really good marketers. And maybe this was their early stab at it in 2016, but I don't think this is accidental. The interspersing of these different ideas. The last one was about democracy, and say that we're going to be put to the test.
Oh, yes.
Yes, our democratic values are going to be put to the test.
No question about that. Not that I'm a fan of democracy per se, because I've often described it as just mob rule dressed up in a coat and tie. But if you look at democracy as the values that generally occurred in kind of democratic countries, things like, freedom and individualism and free speech and free thought and the rest of it, yeah, those are definitely going to be put to the test.
I think they're being put to the test now. So what we should do,
but
if there's
then it says something about Western values. Did it? Do I recall something like that?
Let me bring it up again. We should just, I want to double check that. It's worth seeing this for sure. At the very end here. Yep, it was Western values. Western values have been tested to the breaking point. I also love how they have the McDonald's logo there. Like that's what they're associating with Western values, well, McDonald's?
Yes, exactly. Like everybody's learned to kind of hate McDonald's for all kinds of reasons. But wait a minute, Western values aren't about McDonald's. It's just a commercial corporation.
Right. So it's that, and then
checks and balances that must not be forgotten. Well, that's
what the hell does that mean?
What we're looking at here actually is the richest and most powerful people in the world get together in Davos and figure out what to do with all these plebeians, all these hoi polloi, all these capitacensi out there. I mean, these people that are basically a nuisance to us. I mean, it's nice to have them serving us in restaurants and making stuff in factories, and but basically they're a pain. They should all be replaced with robots. So just us have the earth to.
Yeah, and by these the us in this situation is the same guy that is this Klaus who wrote this book. Amazingly, was published. It's about COVID, but it was published in June of this year. Pretty remarkably, they even have the George Floyd stuff in here, which supposedly happened. That happened on May 25th, but that's in here too.
You know, there are so many good books to read. We just don't have time.
This is not a good book. It's not.
And one odd thing is that I read Klaus Schwab's biography. He's in his 80s, I guess, but he went to the University of Freiburg in Switzerland, and he was there. I guess he got started, getting his. I don't know what he was doing there, but he was at the university. I was there. I went there for a year, my junior year. He was there before I was. I probably knew people that knew him, but I wouldn't want to know him. He's one of these people that I don't think I would have anything in common with, any values, anything. It's like an alien creature.
Well, and if he could be confused as an alien creature if you look at him and hear him talk. He's a pretty accurate version of Dr. Evil. He just needs a hairless cat, I think.
Yeah, exactly. These people really do want to take over the world and tell everybody else what to do for their own good, and they'll be happy owning nothing.
Right. And we're going to talk, I definitely, in another episode, we'll talk about a little bit more about the Great Reset itself, which is the updated marketing plan of the World Economic Forum, for how we're going to essentially roll out what feels to me like a control grid, on humans in general, not Klaus and his buddies, but the rest of us anyway. But there's too much to get into for this episode. So
no, it is. And anyway, I guess that song is correct. Everybody wants to rule the world. It's just that these people are in a position to give it a shot. And it's, rich and powerful people that get together at, whether it's Davos or the Bilderbergers or the Council on Foreign Relations or Bohemian Grove. There's a lot of these things. And it's natural enough. I mean, birds of a feather do flock together, and rich guys have more in common with other rich guys than they do with, starving Africans, although they make a big deal out of wanting to do things for starving Africans.
It seems like they want to keep them on the on the starving side of the scale. In my mind, they don't want them to be able to use their forests to be able to lift themselves out of poverty.
No, that's consuming the earth's resources. What are you talking about?
Exactly. All right. Well, we'll leave that one there for now, and we'll talk to you again. Thanks, everybody.